Hi there. This is an informal listing of the top 10 TV shows that I personally managed to watch in 2022. It's really just a rough introduction that I made as an afterthought to a series of videos I've already scripted and recorded. They're done. On looking ahead to the coming year, what's TV like in 2023? Because this is a Game of Thrones franchise channel that House of the Dragon Season 2 won't come until summer of 2024. We have a year and a half. What are we going to watch in the meantime? So I have a more developed, it's more thought out, scripted thing for 2023, but I originally wasn't going to make something for 2022 at all. Then I noticed that Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs put out a really good combined podcast where they went over their top 10 of the year. Each of them had a different list. And I said, I might as well toss out an informal video. This is like a behind the scenes bonus video, just bonus commentary. This isn't a formal video of, well, what was I watching in 2022? Just if you're curious, that it's interesting when you see the taste clusters, that it's fascinating that streaming TV works a lot like the algorithm on YouTube, where they noticed sometimes certain TV shows, there's overlapping categories, that they don't impose the categories, they discover them, that people who like Riverdale also seem to like this other type of fantasy show, and they realize it's fantasy mysteries, or 1899 and Dark and this and Lost. Well, that's a subcategory, and then they try to find what's the through line here. So it's interesting seeing what are other shows that Game of Thrones fans are also into, which is weird because there's a lot of overlap between different categories. I mean, it's a political, realistic fantasy show with politics and succession conflicts, so you could see people who like Succession or The West Wing getting into it, but then the fantasy element, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, but that's high fantasy, so it's not quite the same as that. Star Wars has the same thing, where Andor is really political and doesn't have Jedi, and then you could have something like Obi-Wan, which is just pure Jedi, that there's different aspects to the fictional universe. And on top of that, I think the big divide, though, is between mainstream stuff and Emmy-level stuff. That, particularly for Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs' top 10, they don't watch The Crown. I don't watch The Crown. I kind of want to check out Succession just because it's winning a lot of awards, and to see what the other HBO stable of writers can do, and directors. If I see, this director was on The Succession, I'd like to be familiar with them beforehand. So I'm probably going to binge it in the coming year, because I keep putting it off, just so I can talk about it. But when you see fandom.com, I retweet that a lot, putting out these were the top 10 things, or these were the top 10 most searched IMDb things of the year, they're usually not, though they're a mix, sometimes there's The Crown in there, but this is going to be more popular stuff than it is Emmy-level obscure things. That's not to dump on those, it's just that's generally what I end up watching. That this is really an extension of that list that IMDb put out at the top of 2022, which we were all really intrigued by at the time, that at the time this was considered, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones was considered a dead franchise, because critics didn't feel like reporting on it, even though there was grassroots interest in it. And everyone was really surprised when IMDb put out their list of the top 10 most anticipated shows of 2022, which is based on site traffic, objectively, not, critic choice. And all the news sites are really surprised. What do you mean House of the Dragon is the most searched for new show of 2022? Even George R. R. Martin was remarking on, wow, we were the top of the list ahead of all these other fantasy giants. That the list was House of the Dragon, then Lord of the Rings TV show, then Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which was really good. Thankfully, it turned out to be really good adaptation. And the rest was a mix of Star Wars and Marvel shows. That we were ahead, House of the Dragon was ahead of all of that, was really intriguing. And that was new shows. Returning shows were, of course, other projects. The Boys, for example, is a big one. But this is sort of me as a follow-up video checking in on the stuff I watch. I said at the time that generally lines up with what I'm watching. And The other things, and this is why this is an informal video, last year was not a normal year for me, and I was barely able to watch TV I wanted to get to, because I was so busy with prep for the beginning of this entirely new show, House of the Dragon, I was working on videos most of the time. That when I say this is a show I watched, these are shows that I like enough that I turn my computer and phone off, and I'm just watching it as if I was in a movie theater. Not, I put it on as background noise, which is, I tend to put Adult Swim on a lot in the background. I'm usually just watching reruns of stuff, or like Futurama things, or, stuff I would sit down for, like that. I'm rarely doing it. Last year was nuts. Family stuff in the spring, then which I was pretty much delayed for 2 months because of that. Then 2 years of pandemic, I said I finally have to get out there and run around doing job applications most of the summer. That ate up my summer doing job applications a lot, because everything's opening up again after Omicron ended. That I finally did get a job in the fall, which ate up a ton of time. It's weird that, like, at the height of the pandemic, thinking a full year ago, and Omicron shut everything down again, you think, wow, I'm sitting here on the couch in lockdown again, time to go down that checklist of shows I need to catch up on. They might be bad. So you end up watching comfort shows, reruns of good shows as a comforting thing, rather than check out that show that might not be good. So the weird thing is, when I actually got a new job again in fall, I had so much less time. The fact that it was being taken away from me made me prioritize what free time I had much better, because I was trying to juggle House of the Dragon with Lord of the Rings at the same time. I'd be watching like Rick and Morty stuff on Adult Swim just as a casual fan, and then I had to catch up on Andor at the end of winter and catching up on Lord of the Rings because I fell behind. But like August onwards, I remember pretty well, okay, I was watching one show. I'd like be watching Sandman or something. And I had a pretty good schedule. Before that, it's a little fuzzier in my mind, so I had to go back and check of, wait, what was I watching? And also, like, because there wasn't much going on in spring, or like when there was a break, I'd end up marathoning old shows that I missed in 2021. So the moral of the story is, this is just for the series that is coming after this one, where I'm going over in detail what's coming in 2023. I didn't get to watch that much stuff in 2022. And there's basically a top 10 list, because these are the 10 things I watched. So with all that introduction out of the way, that thinking this is revisiting the top 10 list of the top 10 new projects IMDb put out at the top of New Year's 2022. Now, New Year's 2023, what have I been doing for 12 months? Well, number one, this isn't in a particular order, but number one for me is, of course, House of the Dragon. And going down IMDb's list, yes, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power was on my list, though I'd rank it number 10. That's the point of it, just to show you I wasn't able to watch that many things. Like, if I was able to, I never started The Boys Season 1. I mean, I've seen clips of it out of context. I think it's a very incisive satire about corporate culture, the whole thing that they have PR teams to make, they're celebrities, that's the joke, that celebrities are awful people backed by corporations, but they have really good PR teams, that their public image is different. That is really cutting, and they're really good at it. But I just physically haven't had time to watch the whole thing. I mean, I want to, but I want to pay attention to it instead of just burning through it. So I don't know when I'll be ever able to do that. Good. So that guides my whole thing here. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to get to that I couldn't. And if you're going to suggest it, please don't. That if I was going to watch one new show that wasn't on this list, it would be The Boys. And if you have anything else like that, like I never watched Severance, I never watched Yellow Jackets, I've heard they're good shows, but top of the list is The Boys, and I really don't think I'm even going to get to that in the next 12 months. How backed up my schedule is. And you'll see that in the next video, how I'm planning things out, because I have to work now. We're not just sitting around in lockdown. So, top of the list is House of the Dragon. Bottom of the list would be Lord of the Rings of Power. Not so much for the show itself, but for the meta-level experience of commenting on it. Like, the Book of Boba Fett was fun to watch and comment on with other people on a meta level, watching the criticisms of it. And it was sloppy, there were too many cooks in the kitchen, but generally I had fun with it as a flawed project, more than I liked it as an actual show, if that makes sense. I wasn't hating on it, it's just, yeah, this is zany, throw everything in the kitchen sink in there, fun. But whatever, that obviously wasn't in the top 10 shows of the year. And also from IMDb's top 10 list, what I will, Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, was, for me, one of the top 10 shows of the year. This was incredibly, infamously difficult to adapt project, and it was perfect. And to see Neil sitting with the cast talking about specific episodes in the after show, that this was a really good adaptation of Sandman. And that when, like at the beginning of the year, when Martin was saying, I'm standing next to these other fantasy giants on this IMDb list, yes, Sandman, you could debate whether this was a better thing than House of the Dragon, because it's a different genre entirely. It's a very small scale, intimate, philosophical show. It was probably a better adaptation, if only because House of the Dragon was infamously unfilmable, and they had to cram in too much. And they threw everything in there. If you've seen Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs' thing, they didn't put it that high. They said we really liked it. They put it like number 6, saying it was bold enough to take all of these risks of we're going to do something on this scale. And now and again, there'd be missteps of there should have been 13 episodes. They'd miss things in the time jump. But the idea of they were bold enough to think we can cover a 20-year story and there's going to be time jumps in it, that this was not a conservative show. This was a risk taker. And it's rough and tumble, but it works. Even like the hardcore book fan sites think House of the Dragon was as good of an adaptation of the source materials you could ever make, because it was difficult, and there's different, the unreliable narrator stuff too. Sandman may have been a more concise page-to-screen adaptation. Enjoyability-wise, hey, I like House of the Dragon a lot more, but in terms of Sandman was infamously unfilmable, because people don't listen to Neil Gaiman. When they showed, like, they make it look easy. So that was one of my TV highlights of the year. I'd probably put Sandman at number 2 or 3. Okay, just debating between it's in the top 5 of shows I watched, keeping in mind I haven't seen The Boys or Stranger Things. I never started Stranger Things. There's some shows I never want to start. I don't remember the 1980s. I'm too young for that. I don't need 1980s nostalgia porn. And this show was meant to run 2 seasons. How are they dragging it out this much? The kids are too old. I'm making fun, but I'd never watch Stranger Things. If I started one new thing, it would be The Boys, and I don't have time, but that's me. And I watch an eclectic mix of things, but House of the Dragon, Lord of the Rings, which is at the bottom of the list, Sandman. And what else was on IMDb's top 10 list for the coming year was Marvel and Star Wars stuff. I think it's unfair to list more than one thing from those franchises, because I see the MCU TV shows as one big TV show, the one big metaverse. And to a lesser extent, the Star Wars project, even, like, they can be very different. I'm not as comfortable with listing them together. So I decided to make this an even 10. If I count one Marvel project and one Star Wars project from last year, it came out to an even 10, so that's what I'm doing. Also, this was a weaker slate of Marvel TV shows compared to, like, before this we got WandaVision and Loki, and even Falcon and the Winter Soldier felt like Captain America 3.5, because it's following the main movie characters. It had an actual story. It was a character study. It worked pretty well. I mean, it wasn't, reinventing TV the way Loki and WandaVision were, but it was movie quality stuff. I enjoyed it. This year, they weren't bad. They were what they set out to do, and I haven't finished all of them yet. Like, even Hawkeye was pleasant. Moon Knight, Oscar Isaac's great, but it doesn't tie into the wider Marvel-verse that much. Miss Marvel, great for the character, good adaptation of the source material. It's just I like WandaVision and Loki were bigger scale things. She-Hulk is probably the best of the live-action stuff. I haven't finished that either, in terms of that it is a wider MCU scale show. It is a very good adaptation. It was thrilling to watch, what little I've seen of keeping the humor in there. It does tie into things. But if I had to pick one Marvel show of the past year that really topped them all, beginning of the year, animated, Marvel's What If Season 1. And again, this is because I haven't finished She-Hulk, but just in terms of the scale of it, and that you can do anything. Now, Loki is dealing with the metaverse, but there's only so much you can do in this Terry Gilliam-like one-camera thing. Animation, you can do anything. And just every episode was an entirely different alternate universe. Here's a universe where Ultron won and his robots have destroyed the entire world. Just the scale of that. And then switching to something else entirely. And then that I thought it would be all standalones, that it all came together in the end. You realize this was all building up to a crossover, and that what if Ultron won and got all the Infinity Stones and tried to take over the multiverse and kill the Watcher? So they put together a multiversal Avengers. Just the scale, the writing was clever. How it all tied together was very, very smooth, and just it fit perfectly. It was like a multi-part movie, in a way that I don't think anything else could really capture, because it's of course multiverse is borrowing a bit from all of the best heroes, whereas She-Hulk is mostly focused on She-Hulk. This is everything. I'm really looking forward to season 2. So, like, that isn't a hard rule, that some years, if there's both a Loki and a WandaVision that are so good, I would list them separately. This year, generally, just to make the list rounded out, I'm just going to put one Marvel thing as Marvel's What If Season 1. Honorable mention to She-Hulk. And for Star Wars, similarly, well, Boba Fett, I had fun watching it, the critiquing of it as a romp, okay? But obviously not the top 10. The big two this year were first Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then Andor. Obviously, Andor was the best Star Wars project of the year. Even if it wasn't a Star Wars show, it would be one of the top 10 shows of the year. The writing was that good. But it wasn't just a show that happens to be a Star Wars show either. It does examine the rise of the Empire as an authoritarian regime and this real insurgency against it that acts like a real insurgency, and just the writing that it didn't have Jedi in it at all, didn't have space battles really. It was just focused on a rebellion against this authoritarian regime, and just the writing was really on point there. I don't think we should use that to mock Obi-Wan Kenobi, because I think Kenobi did a really good job. That it's harder to deal with established characters as a prequel, because we know how they die eventually, that you can't change too much about Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. But as a nice follow-up for the prequels crew, that for Ewan, for Hayden Christensen, just seeing the gang back together. This is the last time we're going to see James Earl Jones as the voice of Darth Vader. And yes, I know it was mostly synthesized anyway, but he's officially retired from Darth Vader since then. Just, it felt like, and with Jimmy Smits, it just felt like, okay, we're re-examining everything. The middle was a little slow, I admit, but it worked. That it's harder. I don't want to blame it. It's almost like an adaptation. When I say don't compare adaptations to a Bourne TV show, this was harder to do. And I'm still happy we had it. So, the top Star Wars project was Andor, with a very strong honorable mention for Obi-Wan Kenobi, because I'm a glass half full kind of guy. There was nothing that upset me about it. I was waiting for them to do something that was against character, or this made so little sense, it ruined it for me. It didn't reach very high, but it's when you're playing with something so delicate, it's a case of, with characters so beloved, that you have to be very careful. So I'm happy that on that trip, on that tightrope walk, they didn't fall off at any point for Obi-Wan Kenobi, though it'd be interesting if we had like Hugo Awards that go down to the level of multiple Star Wars actors in a specific Best Actor of the Year category, like Diego Luna for Andor got nominated next week for a Best Actor Golden Globe. Ewan Mitchell didn't. Not Ewan Mitchell, that's the other guy. Ewan McGregor didn't. But I still think he gave a really good Obi-Wan performance. Like the middle scenes, like episode 3 was really good, where he's just talking to Leia about well, the Jedi were my only family, but I actually think I had an original family. I wonder what happened to them. Just he is a good actor. Don't get me wrong. So I enjoyed that. Andor is just much better written, but its hands are free to tell the story it wants, because it's telling basically an original story. And skipping ahead, this has led to the debate of thinking of the Red Team Review Preston Jacobs video, which was the best show of the year, Andor or House of the Dragon. I think that's an unfair comparison, but even I would say Andor worked better as a TV show because it was a born TV show. It wasn't an adaptation. Even The Boys is an adaptation of sorts, which is playing it loose. That this is why movies, and even the Emmys, I think, have distinct categories for best screenplay, original, or best adapted screenplay. They're different when you have to adapt something. So for House of the Dragon, that this was considered unfilmable, that they managed to get that in. For Sandman, that we could have a real debate about. Sandman was also considered unfilmable. I think that's just because the studios are cowards. You could easily tell a Sandman story in terms of the length of it, because it was already in a visual medium. It was in a graphic novel. Versus House of the Dragon, where it's this in-universe history book. There wasn't even that much source material, but there were really good core ideas in it as an outline. It was much harder to do and took much bigger risks. But I think House of the Dragon and Sandman are entirely different category from Andor, which has the benefit of it was conceived of as a TV show, and even an advantage over Obi-Wan Kenobi was sort of a, not adaptation, but outgrowth of another movie as this prequel, sequel, interquel thing, that its hands were tied on how much they could tell about Obi-Wan and Darth Vader without really shaking up the world, or Leia and Luke. I mean, I never thought Luke was going to die in it. That is an unfair comparison. So maybe you could compare Andor to The Mandalorian Season 3 when it comes out or something. That'll be interesting, because these are basically born TV shows. I myself, obviously had more fun with House of the Dragon, as this is what our fandom is doing, but Andor I just straight up loved also. I'm very upset that it doesn't have higher ratings, because it is one of the best Star Wars projects of any kind. It's very close to Lucas's original vision of the Empire and the rise of fascism and all of that. So that's in there. So we've got House of the Dragon, Lord of the Rings, Sandman, Marvel's What If, and Andor are the top 5. Well, no, 5, I said Lord of the Rings is bottom of the list. Number 6 out of my top 10, I'm going to cheat and list The Expanse Season 6. Because the last 2 episodes technically did air in January of 2022. I know that's cheating, but it emphasizes just how much I really like that show, and just The Expanse set a new bar. This is one of those shows that comes out once a decade that sets a new bar for what science fiction is capable of. Like in the 90s, it was Babylon 5. In the 2000s, like Farscape really advanced what you could do in terms of storytelling and characterization. And here we have The Expanse, where it's Game of Thrones in space. It's politics. There are no good guys versus bad guys as such. Each faction has their bad guys, but it's this 3-way conflict between Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt miners, and each faction has their own POVs and their own sides. The acting was great. The near future extrapolation of, well, this is kind of what the near future 200 years from now could be like. Interesting. The different philosophies of each faction, that I was and still am Team Mars. MCRN forever, Bobby Draper, that you think they kind of build, oh, Mars is best. Just Mars is there going, the Earth is dying, and you morons in Earth and the Belt don't seem to understand that we're in this for the species, that we need to survive. And you're looking at how you're going to survive for tomorrow when we're staring mass extinction in the face. How are we going to survive for the next 100 years? Also, the Martians have the best toys because they're the best and brightest, so their tech is the best. But in terms of what were we as science fiction fans talking about, and I mean, objectively, like looking, before I turned this on, I looked at the list of Hugo nominations year to year for TV shows. The Expanse was rightly in contention the past 5-6 years. that we will look back on this as one of the great TV shows, and it got canceled, that it's a trilogy of trilogies. And there's a 30-year time skip between the 6th and 7th books, though, because of future medicine, people can live to be like 120 in this, so like the cast would only need to look 10 years older. So, I mean, they were canceled once before at the break between seasons 3 and 4, and then shifted from sci-fi to Amazon. So they said, like 5-10 years from now, we could find new life on another channel. You never know. I look forward to that. But just in terms of the bar that the Expanse set, I'm willing to cheat a little that it was technically, it was a winter 2022 thing that ended in January. The the season 6 finale, not series finale for now, that should win a Hugo Award. Because the Hugo Award goes by calendar date, January 1st to December 31st. So just in terms of how influential that was, go back even like mainstream TV stuff, everyone was reviewing that last December to January. That is what we were talking about before we all shifted to Boba Fett and stuff and Star Wars stuff by February. But so you see how this is the type of thing I'd be into, that when it's been described as Game of Thrones in space, that the writers are friends with George R. R. Martin, they've done work with him, no surprise that someone who likes Game of Thrones would also like The Expanse. And that is my number 6 point. Going through my list here, that I don't physically have time, I wanted to watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I don't get Paramount Plus, it isn't worth the hassle, I don't get that, it's not worth the trouble of torrenting it, and even if someone gave me a Blu-ray box set, I physically wouldn't have the time. It's not even, that's just layering on top of the time problems. I don't even have the service and be a hassle to download. If I had time, I'd watch The Boys, and I get Amazon. That's just, there's too much to watch, and I'm trying to limit what I'm watching. That's why I'm planning out what I'm watching next year. Much less if I'd have time to watch mostly Emmy-level stuff that's not mainstream things, like the niche shows, like, again, I've heard Severance and Yellow Jackets are really good, but I do not have time to try them out. If I started one thing, to be The Boys, like Red Team Review, Preston Jacobs, both of them put that at like number 3 or number 2. That would be nice to see. I just can't get into it. I haven't seen like Netflix's Wednesday, even though in terms of IMDb put out their most discussed shows of 2022 retrospective, House of the Dragon and Wednesday tied for number 1. So I'll probably marathon that next Halloween season. It's more of a Halloween season October show. But you see, now I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. When you get to the bottom 4, these are things I managed to squeeze in and watch in 2022, many of which are, I caught up on things in the prior year. Well, actually, number 7 is Rick and Morty Season 6, which I somehow managed to squeeze in and keep watching every episode as House of the Dragon was running. I don't go online to talk about this or anything. I enjoy it as a sci-fi show. Red Team Review Preston Jacobs mentioned this too, that Season 6 was a lot better than Season 5 and returned to form. And, I was angry at the time I was watching Season 5, and it wasn't that bad, but I later found out it's one of the production staff, one of the writers died during the creation of Season 5. So everyone was really shaken up by that. He suddenly died, and it affected their work. I'm not going to just go on making fun of Season 5. Okay, there was a death in the writing staff, and everyone was really messed up. And that happened. That's tragic. Season 6, they were more on the ball because of the time that had passed. They advanced the storyline. And just even the standalone episodes were all, there was never a bad episode. Or like a dull, this is just a retread. Each one, even the standalones, were an interesting idea. Like the Night People episode, they said, we've been wanting to make this as a Halloween episode for a couple of seasons, and you could watch it out of order. It would be the same show. It was a really interesting concept. Not unlike Severance, that idea that if you split your consciousness between different times of day, that there's your work self and your home self, that's like a Philip K. Dick Blade Runner kind of thing, or a Scanner Darkly kind of thing, that if you split your experiences, you split your consciousness, because your consciousness is based on your memories and experiences. So overall, Rick and Morty Season 6, better than Season 5. I've been watching it. Rick and Morty is one of the few animated shows that's like in the list of top general shows of the year. usually, not just the animation ghetto, as they call it. When you look at top downloaded shows, they're like in the top 10 lists alongside House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings. Not the top two, but it's in there. So I watched that. That was also on the list of Red Team Review, Preston Jacobs. But number 8, case in point about I was behind this year. Back in spring, when there was a death in the family, I was really nuts, and I said, I need some outside experience, just stimulation, just plug something in on the TV. I can't think. I'm numb now. Is there something I should watch that I missed from last year? And a friend told me, watch Arcane Season 1 on Netflix, which everyone was talking about, and it blew them away in fall of 2021. So what was I watching in spring of 2022? I was basically just blown away by how good Arcane Season 1 was. It's won a lot of awards. It deserves all of them. I can only hope Season 2, whenever it comes out, keeps up that level of quality. You may wonder why Invincible on Amazon is not on my list. That's because I missed the first season. I caught episodes of it, and it was really good. But as opposed to The Boys, where I'm 3 seasons behind, Invincible Season 2 is going to come out soon, so I'm just going to marathon Season 1 right before Season 2 to watch Invincible, because again, it's this really realistic take, dark realistic take on superheroes. Not unlike how George R. R. Martin did stuff with Wildcard's universe of superhero stuff, but just gritty and realistic, and the world building and everything. I want to get to that, but Arcane also, like, I'm more of a world building and ideas guy, even though the psychology, it's weird. It's not that I don't care about characters. Then I'll be raving about something that's a really good psychological study of the characters in Arcane are just really well done, how there's anti-villains, how you see the rise of Jinx, that they took what's basically their Joker and gave her a tragic backstory that felt really good. This was like the Killing Joke with Alan Moore and the Joker, of how can you make a compelling backstory for this character that still doesn't lighten them, but just makes them more tragic. And the issues it touches on, well, there's the globalization and stuff, and the drugs and everything. A lot of issues they touch on there, and the urban setting. It's this urban fantasy more than anything, even though it's kind of cyberpunk magic. That what more can I'm not going to make videos about this, because what could I possibly contribute to the discussion that hasn't already been said about Arcane? Maybe when Season 2 comes out, I'll make like a short audio-only review, just going, wow, this season was really good, just in case you're wondering what I'm watching. But it's not contributing. You see what I'm doing here, that these are bonus videos I'm making purely for my own followers. They're not meant to get a lot of people watching. It's just if you're a hardcore subscriber, you want to know what I'm into here. This is just me socializing. So you got Rick and Morty, Arcane Season 1, and actually put Marvel's What If in there too. That's animated, but I don't even think of it as animation because it's voiced by the live-action cast, and it's kind of in canon, so whatever. I don't really make much of a distinction. I watch a lot of adult cartoons, like the Steven Universes, the Adventure Times, the Batmans, all that level of thing. If you've seen that channel on YouTube, The Roundtable, they've been doing a good job of reporting on that. It is a dry spell for adult animation. A lot of things have been canceled recently. But then again, there's a lot of new things like Arcane and Invincible. So, who knows? Mentioning that brings up number 9 on my list, The Owl House. I'm not even that big of an Owl House fan compared to other people, but I'm a huge fan of Gravity Falls, which is the predecessor show for that. And I put it on the list just to emphasize the death of long-form serialized adult animation, that this was getting really dark, the world building was great, the writing was good. Incidentally, it was the first Disney show to have an LGBT lead, but they didn't reveal that until like the 10th episode, that she's bi and she gets a girlfriend, and they are the primary couple of the show. This isn't a one-off thing. Make it that prominent. And they got essentially canceled. That they were supposed to have 3 seasons of like 20 episodes each. They got renewed for the current season, the 3rd season. They only got renewed for 6 episodes worth of material instead of 20 episodes. They were like, we already storyboarded it all out. And the reason I put the Owl House in here is something that the creator, Dana Terrace, said, that they asked her, and reporters like did they make you cancel it? Did they truncate it because of backlash to the LGBT characters? And because there was a backlash when Steven Universe had a same-sex marriage, and it was really upsetting that this is a really good sci-fi show, and they truncated it for that. And she said, well, they discussed it, and it was a concern, but ultimately, no. She said the deciding factor is they were against serialized storytelling in general, because it's harder to sell in syndication. And this is shit we've been putting up with sci-fi, like, since the 90s and earlier with Star Trek. Or the early 90s, like I remember Farscape got screwed over with this by its final season, that when networks go, oh, we can sell it in reruns for more, so we want standalone episodes that don't have good storytelling instead of one really long serialized thing. And you've been seeing them watering down and just dispelling any long-form serialized storytelling they've had. And we kind of hoped that, streaming TV would lead to a resurgence of serialization because you aren't flipping through random episodes. They're meant to be binge-watched. But then Netflix, and to an extent HBO Max, gutted a lot of their programming because, well, it's expensive. It's like the Harley Quinn show, for example, is a serialized show. It's not episodic. We need more stuff like that. I don't know if Harley Quinn Season 3... Oh, that was out this year. I just haven't seen it yet. That would have gotten this spot if it weren't for The Owl House. I'm putting The Owl House on the list just to emphasize how endangered mature, long-form, serialized animation is in danger. And it was specifically canceled because we don't want any long-form, scripted-out drama, which is upsetting. Like, imagine if they said the same thing to Arcane or Invincible. Well, this is too serialized. Or to Rick and Morty. So that was just because that is happening right now. I think this week is the second to last episode. It's a series of 3 double episode specials. And like this week, the Owl House part 2 of 3 of the final specials are out. It's just, you're not allowed to tell the type of story you need to in terms of long form storytelling. But then again, some other successes are in there, so it's been a bit of a mix. And my 10th and last thing, well, again, the 10 spot is for Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, because I haven't seen more than 10 shows. If you count Marvel and Star Wars as all one big thing. The 10th thing was another animated thing. You probably haven't heard of this. It's a show on FXX called Little Demon. Came out in fall. I mean, we were all watching House of the Dragon and stuff. It didn't come out to much fanfare, but I really liked it. It's 10 episodes, and I checked it out because it stars Danny DeVito and Aubrey Plaza, and they're really good actors. And I checked it out, and the whole story is, it's one of those, like Good Omens by Neil Gaiman. There's this girl who is the Antichrist, the daughter of the devil. And her mother is trying to protect her and doesn't want... The devil is played by Danny DeVito. His daughter is played by his real-life daughter, Lucy DeVito. And it's really, that's like backdrop. That in terms of tone, it's dirty, it's snarky. It's, if you liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's kind of like that tonally. But at its core, it's a character study about a single mom and her child, and all the stress they're under, that they accurately show how much yelling there is, that with the fights they get into. But at the core of it, they're likable characters, that they are generally nice, well-meaning people that are dealing with a stressful situation. And they treat it literally like when the devil comes back, they go, okay, I'll do visitation every other weekend. So it's just a thinly veiled metaphor for they're this divorced, unmarried family, essentially, and her bouncing between the two parents. And the main character is just a nice, normal person that crazy things happen to. And her mom, Aubrey Plaza, like, in the years she's had to train to fight the devil, has become like a cross between Sarah Connor and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And just, it's snarky, it's funny, that just, it was consistently entertaining. And I'm not even into the world building, because they have rules and stuff and magic. You don't even need to pay attention. It's just this zany character study about, it could have been about time travelers, it could have been about aliens. But the metaphor of, well, I'm the Antichrist, but it's kind of like bouncing between a single parent with visitation rights. was fun. And I'm mentioning it because also it was very recent. I only recently caught up with the ending of it during Christmas break because I was behind in my schedule. This came out like 2 months ago. I actually think it hasn't even come out internationally yet in every market. Like they're doing one of those rolling premieres, like FXX is an obscure channel. I don't even think it's on Hulu. But it's like the same channel that Always Sunny in Philadelphia is on, so of course Danny DeVito is attached. I had fun with that, and again, as a fan of adult animation, I'd feel bad if that doesn't get a second season because it was really good. But that's more of an example of the war on animation in general. That you've seen so many things getting cut because of the expense of it. I never even got to see Pantheon. I wanted to see that. But that's generally what I've been mucking about with in the past year, because I was busy and could barely focus on anything other than House of the Dragon, and trying to keep up with Star Wars and to a lesser extent the Marvel franchise, which I am still behind on. I haven't finished She-Hulk yet. That this was the unscripted 40-minute thing. Now up to 40 minutes now, and I'm not even going to put slides in it. This is audio only, it's a rant. That you've all lived through 2022, so I only expect a handful of people to really pay attention to this. This is all preamble for... I did make 2 reviews of what I thought were the top 2 other shows of the year. I made a review for Sandman, and I'm almost done with my review for Andor. Not a formal rule that I wouldn't review my top 10 shows individually. It's just those 2 were good enough that they merited standalone reviews, as my way of saying, if you're not watching this, you need to watch it. Sandman and Andor. Then I'm moving on from that into this big, okay, everything coming in every season of 2023 through next fall. What are we going to be following, or what am I watching at least? And this is my way of limiting what I watch. I don't have time to get into The Boys. I mean, maybe that'll change next summer. I don't know, but I don't plan on it if I were to marathon it. But obviously, like, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be watching The Last of Us, which is really the hyped show of the year, is also one of the first on HBO Max. I don't know if I'm going to try to marathon Succession, because I'm not really into it, but a lot of people I know watch it. And then mostly the Marvel Star Wars projects of the year. There aren't nearly as many new shows coming in 2023 as 2022, because this was an unusual boom year. This was the last of all the projects that were meant to come out when these new streamers launched. And then the pandemic happened, so they had to put all their projects on hold. This is like the last of like the Battle of the Fantasy Titans with Lord of the Rings and House of the Dragon. You're not going to see another big launch on that scale again, or something on the scale of The Witcher, or the scale of The Wheel of Time. Never started either of those. That there aren't going to be giant new franchise things experimentally launching. They might have something on their hands with Amazon's making a Fallout TV show. I don't even know if that'll be good. Avatar: The Last Airbender live action, the original creators quit, so I don't know if that has a vote of confidence. But I'll go over this in the next video. Just I'm actually trying to limit what I'm watching to per season, like winter season, spring, summer, fall. I'm trying not to have more than 2 shows I'm actively watching. Now then, in the job situation, going to work, there physically isn't that much time. I am very far behind on House of the Dragon reporting because, the work piled up. I said, I can't do this. I'm catching up over Christmas break now because it's still, through the 12 days of Christmas, I'm catching up on a lot of stuff. The Blu-ray stuff is going to come out in March. We have to go over that as well because it's a new show. We have to figure out all the new behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, the characters they introduce in Season 2 won't be as in-depth as what they... Like, Cregan Stark, there's not as much to say about him as Daemon or Rhaenyra. But there's so many interviews about the thought that went into the core 7 cast members. There's a lot to unpack there in interviews and things. So you can see how I'm into, like, mature fantasy / Game of Thronesy type stuff, like The Expanse, Sandman, general Star Wars, Marvel stuff. What was the best show of the year? I already went over that. I'll end with this. I can see the argument that Andor was the best TV show of the year, but I would rather make subcategories that, like awards, adaptations are more difficult, so I don't know if you can even philosophically compare Andor with House of the Dragon, because it tried to fit this sprawling book world on screen, which was very difficult. It wasn't trying to be a TV show, it was trying to present something more than a TV show, and somehow managed to work, because everyone working on it believed in what they were doing and were very skilled career experts at their jobs. That when you it seems like an impossible task when you have talented people who believe in what they're doing and aren't just trying to run off to make movies for someone else. That's what they're capable of. They did better than, it's not, walking on water, but it did better than I thought it would in terms of the quality of it. But that's what I was going through, like just going through the Red Team Review Preston Jacobs video. I'll link that at the end of this in the end credits. That I agreed with some of their stuff, and like I think The Boys is probably good. Andor was at the top of their list. I haven't seen some of the other things they saw, but 2022 is in the rear view mirror. That's why I'm doing this as a live stream rant, unedited. That the real formal video I'm working on, which would be more concise because I scripted it and it made slides and everything, is what are we doing in 2023 in terms of sci-fi fantasy things we're discussing? Because everyone's been on break, that hardly anyone's been online talking about stuff, and there's been nothing in the news. I'm so sad that for House of the Dragon fandom, there wasn't really anything to talk about since late October. That like the convention didn't give us any news, and we didn't get a Blu-ray set. I'm hoping that changes when the behind-the-scenes book comes out 1 month from 3 weeks from now. There's a big behind-the-scenes book coming out, and we might get Blu-ray content, animated stuff in spring. I don't know. One way or another, filming starts in March, and we'll be going over filming news, but it's just how are we passing the time now? So please stick with me after the jump. It's my review of Sandman, my review of Andor, and my outline of it, spending weeks reviewing, okay, state of the industry, what are they putting out in 2023? I checked, IMDb didn't put out another list of what is everyone most anticipated, or at least they haven't yet. But in the spirit of 12 months ago, at the beginning of the year, we said, wow, these are the most anticipated shows, top 10 new, top 10 returning. I made my version of that, and I categorized it I went by streaming platform. These are the things Disney's putting out. These are the things that, like, Paramount Plus is putting out, that HBO Max is putting out. I don't really watch anything on cable anymore. And just going through, okay, let's plan out our year, because our time is limited. We have to schedule out, okay, this is what we'll be watching.